Thank you. Good morning, friends. I think for me, I'm very delighted to be here this morning. And my joy is in the fact that my very best friend today is being inaugurated as a storyteller. I remember when I was young, and as a young boy, I was very keen to hear stories. And my grandmother used to tell me quite a number of stories. And there is one which I'll try to maybe paraphrase. And it was a story about two characters, a boy and a girl. They were sisters. One was called Mwambu, the boy, and the sister was called Sela. And these two, like siblings, they loved each other. And they used to stay in an environment which was hostile. What made it hostile? They were ogres that used to eat people. And these ogres had eaten all people except these two. Yeah? Ogres and predators. Is there any connection? So, they used to live in a cave. And it was Sela who would stay home and Mwambu would go herding. And for him, and for her to recognize that it was Mwambu coming back and not the ogre, he would make a tune. I'm not so good at singing, but let me try. Let me try. Okay. Chama hongenga nasio 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 ikula chinune nasio nasio chama hongenga nasio nasio Musilongo si nasio nasio Siawe tuvile nasio nasio nasio. That was there. Today we call it. What is that? What is that key for unlocking things? What do we call it? Password. That was the password. That was the password. So if Sela had that, she knew the brother was on the way. But the ogre also kept learning. He learned about that password. And one day, he sang it perfectly. And so he was able to enter the cave and eat Sela. But Mwambu was not to give up. He made it his life passion to pursue the ogre and take revenge. And what was significant was that at the end of the story, my grandmother would say, enjoy. What did that mean? It meant that if I told a story, it added to my life. Telling stories adds to one's life. And therefore you are saying, let the story die, but I live. That's what it meant. So storytelling enhances our lives. It adds to our lives. It makes us immortal. And then I also read some stories from the Bible. And these ones were about families. There was a story about two brothers, Jacob and Esau. They were twins. And they started quarreling even in the mother's womb. And when they were born, it was for Esau to take the birthright because he was the elder sibling. And Jacob felt disadvantaged. So there was a family plot, and Jacob managed to get the birthright. But because God was interested in Jacob to make him a good boy, he took him through some things. And later on, Jacob came back and told his brother, "My brother, you are my Lord. What do you like to have?" So he offered him everything that he had. Then there's another family story. There was a lady called Ruth. And the person today we are talking about is called Ruth. And this Ruth loved her mother-in-law. Now, her husband died. Even the brothers of the husbands died. So she was a widow, very desperate. Now, unfortunately for Ruth, she was a foreigner in this community. So what was her future? Blank. But she decided that she would give her life to her mother-in-law to serve her forever. And when she did that, it happened that they went back to the mother-in-law's country, and she found a husband. And as history would have it, Ruth became the grandmother of David, and this David is the one we hear that Jesus, who is God, is son of David. Yeah? And the third story is, there was, in a Jewish community, a young boy was born. He was called Yeshua, or Jesus. Yeah? That was his common name. And Jesus liked going to the temple and reading the Word of God. So, from reading the Word of God, he told the people around, he said, "Look, you people, you are my brothers, but I'm a child of God." Then they said, "No, you are the son of Joseph and Mary. You can't be the son of God." He said, "No, I am the son of God." So there was a bitter argument, and because this man was blaspheming, they condemned him and hung him on the cross. Little did they know that they were hanging God. So these are strange stories about families, how we relate, and how God finds his way into our affairs. Yes, God finds way into our affairs. And so this morning, as we are here, my very good friend told me, "I've been going to court for very many years. But in my work, I've come across certain experiences which I would like to share. And this will be a story. And for me to tell this story, I've penned it down, and let's invite some good friends so that they can hear, they can learn about these stories. And that is why we're here. That we can listen about these stories. And in all these things, the bottom line is, in our lives, what gives meaning to what we do? We can be doctors, neurosurgeons. We can be engineers, making artificial intelligence. We can be lawyers, making the best judgments. But what is it we owe to each other? What is it we owe to each other? What is just to give to the other? I think Predators is trying to remind us of that, our obligation to each other. And the wise people say that men change only when ideas move from being out there and the ideas become their consciousness. When an idea is owned to the extent that it becomes our consciousness, and that is what predators, the predators, is trying to do. That we can own those ideas, they become our consciousness, and when they really do, when it becomes our consciousness, the way justice for Sela by Mwambu became his consciousness, we can redress the situation. Thank you.
And I'd like to invite one member of our audience to tell another story, to bring them to life. Some of those stories that have been written in this book, to bring them to life. Ladies and gentlemen, a round of applause for Maimuna Jallow. Keep encouraging her as she makes her way to the front. Yeah, she's looking very colorful. Now, good morning. We would like you to listen to her very, very keenly, which is why I'm not going to give her a microphone, because I want you to pay attention. All right? Listen to what she says and how she says it. Maimuna, the stage is yours.
So the story I'm going to tell you today is from the anthology, and it is Rosetta's story. It had been a good day. Business was good. I sold cereals at the market. Every week, I sold over 5 sacks. And every week, I had to replenish my stock. But not that week. Not that week. It was already getting dark by the time I got home. My children, Toto, Boy, and Baby, were playing outside in the yard, football. That was their favorite game. My husband, Juma, was in Nairobi where he worked. He only came home during his annual leave about 30 days a year, and sometimes during public holidays or if there was a funeral. I watched the children play their game for a while. And then, as it got darker outside, I went inside to prepare the dinner. Juma wanted a boy. I wanted a girl. We already had 2 boys. The children, they often argued about the sex of the baby. The boys championing for another little brother, and Toto, my eldest and the only girl, insisting she would have a sister. So the children, they finished their game outside, and then they came in to have dinner. Once they had finished, They went to bed, and I also tried to go to sleep. But I was restless. I could hear the children snoring and mosquitoes buzzing. No sooner had I closed my eyes that I heard a loud bang on the main door, and it was followed by the sound of shattering glass. I could see flashes of light by the main door and hear murmurs. The next bang splintered the main door into pieces, and suddenly many things started to happen all at once. Some men entered my house. I could not make out their faces. Some went into the sitting room. Others came into my bedroom. One of the men asked me, "Do you want to stay alive or do you want to die?" as he dragged me off the bed. I had to stay calm. I could feel the cold muzzle of a gun pressed up against my neck. I had to stay calm. One of the men, he pulled the stockings that I used to wrap my head at night, and he used it to wrap my hands together and tie them tightly. He then took another scarf from my bedside table and tied my legs tightly. They then took a piece of material and stuffed it inside my mouth. I could not speak. I could not scream. All I could feel was saliva building up in my mouth, being absorbed by that cloth. And suddenly I felt thirsty, so thirsty. "Where is the money?" one of the men asked me. And I pointed towards the cupboard on the right-hand corner of the room. As the men rummaged around the house, I prayed. I prayed, "God, please, please, let my children not be woken up by this noise. Especially Toto. She's such a light sleeper. God, please, protect my children." I could hear them going through the house, the kitchen, the living room, the store. I didn't know how many there were. My head was fuzzy with the panic. My baby was afraid. She could feel my fear. They took a dirty laundry bag and they filled it with everything that they could find. TV, radio cassette player, video player, DVDs, CDs, whatever they could find. And then I heard them coming back up the stairs. His voice was hoarse. It sounded familiar. "Loosen the binds. We will work on her." Work on her. Work on her. What did they mean, work on her? "No, God. Please, no, God. Please, please, have mercy on a pregnant woman and take whatever you want and leave, please." One of the men waved a gun in front of my face. He didn't even need to speak. I just collapsed. They took turns. I counted them. There were 5 of them, and they took turns. I don't know how long it lasted, or for how long I lay there crying after they had finished. But eventually, when I sat up, I felt blood, and my thighs were bruised. Toto! 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 Shh! Don't cry, baby, don't cry. Please help untie mommy, please. It was Daniel, our neighbor, who took me to the hospital. His wife, Linda, stayed with the children. She kept repeating, "What kind of human being rapes a pregnant woman? Huh? What kind of human being rapes a pregnant woman?" My unborn child. Was she going to be okay? I kept asking the doctors and nurses, and they assured me that she would be fine. I wasn't sure I believed them. And when I got home, those words, "Work on her, work on her," they kept ringing in my head. That voice, hoarse, familiar. Work on her. Andrew. Andrew. Andrew that lived 5 compounds away. That was his voice. Andrew. The young man that was blind in one eye. Andrew. I told Danny, and he went to the police station. Several of our neighbors went with him. By now, the news of my rape had gone across the neighborhood, spread like wildfire. When Andrew was eventually caught, they found items from my house in his home, and he was forced to confess the names of the other gang members. Andrew was convicted, sentenced with violence with robbery and gang rape. But by that time, nearly nothing mattered to me anymore. Even my children had to tap me, "Mama, Mama," because my mind would drift off in mid-conversation. I look fine, but I cannot sleep. And if I see flashlights by my door, the fear takes over. Linda, she comes round often, bearing fruits and gifts and news. She's the one who told me, Rosetta, Andrew has been caught, and he has been charged and sentenced to death. He's also received a 10-year suspended sentence for gang rape. Okay, I replied. Rosetta, justice has been served. Okay, I said. What she doesn't realize is that the shadows from that night will follow me for the rest of my life.
And ladies and gentlemen, with your heartiest claps and celebration, join me in welcoming Judge Ruth Sitati. Yes. You're welcome. You're welcome. You're welcome.
I think I'll be more comfortable here than on the stage, because when I'm usually on the stage, there is a table and a chair behind that table where I sit. So even if I tremble, nobody will notice.
No, I think we're happy because if you're there, and we might just be sentenced accidentally.
Yeah, so first of all, I want to say good morning. Good morning, everyone. I'm glad and very, very happy to see each one of you today. I'll start with a little story, then I can say what I want to say. But before I give the little story, I think I have been moved by the storytellers who have spoken before me. Dr. Kihara, Engineer Sitati, and Maimuna. And I would like us to stand up and clap for these people. If you are near one of those storytellers, please hug them on my behalf. Yeah. I will start with a little story, but one is a statement that was made by Nelson Mandela in one of his books that I read. And Nelson Mandela says that there is none of us who does not have a scar. None of us who does not have a scar. Because I think questions were put to Nelson Mandela, and he said, if each one of us was asked to strip, we would find a little scar somewhere, even if it's hidden. And I know that all of us in this room, each one of us has a little scar. It may come from these stories that you have heard, or it may be a physical scar that you got sometime in the course of your life. So let us remember that none of us can say they have no scar. The story I want to tell is this. It's a little story. In 1988, we had a houseboy. He was not a shamba because we didn't have a shamba here in Nairobi, but he was our houseboy. And he had worked for us for 7 years. And on that one day in November, it may have been on a date like this, I'm not quite sure. We were preparing to go up country with our children to harvest maize. We come from Kitale, and December was our harvesting time. So we prepared. We had got some money from the bank. It was somewhere in our bedroom. We didn't have a safe. We don't have a safe because money is not very much. And on that afternoon, we wanted to rush to town to purchase some clothes for our boys. One of them had been circumcised that year, and I was going to come out of Jandoni. So we prepared to go and buy clothes. And in the course of it, something happened. I couldn't find the keys to my bedroom. The bedroom door was, of course, open. I wanted to lock it, but I couldn't find the keys. So I looked for the keys. I couldn't find them. And eventually I decided we would just rush. So we went with the boys, and we left my one daughter behind. She was a little girl aged 5 at that time. Her name is Dr. Naomi Sitati. She is here in the house. Maybe you can stand up and wave. So we left the house, my bedroom door unlocked, because I had had experiences before, and I had decided I would always lock my bedroom. But that day, the keys disappeared. And as I found out later, it was a trick by the houseboy. He had taken the keys because he knew what he wanted. And a day before, out of no practice, I had asked him to clean my bedroom. Something I had never done. So that day, he took the keys because he had searched the house and seen where the money was. So we left our daughter behind. We took the 4 boys with us to town to do shopping because I knew my daughter could pick her clothes. When we came back in the evening, we knocked on the gate. Nobody came to open except my little daughter. And we asked her, "Where is so and so?" She said, "I don't know, he has left." We entered the kitchen. I found the meat on the counter. He had started cutting the meat, and the meat was still there. We entered the servant quarter. We found everything upside down. The only good thing is that my daughter was there, alive and present. Because when you think of these stories, anything could have happened to my daughter now. If it was today, she would probably have been trafficked. She would be perhaps in the US or in the Arab world. We would not have known where she had gone. And that man had a girlfriend who was from Kitui. We didn't know her home very well, but he had come to stay with her. And we said, even if they had taken this girl to Kitui, we would never have found her because we didn't know where to look for her. If it had been today, Naomi would not be the doctor that she is now. She would have been stolen, she would have been trafficked, or even been killed. So these stories have a message to give. That you and I owe a duty to one another. As parents, we need to be careful the environment that Dr. Kihara was talking about. Because anything can happen. Anything, and I'm telling you, anything can happen to your child, to yourself. Even from the Rosetta story, your husband could be away working, making money for you as a family. But what about the environment in which you are living alone with the children? Perhaps if Mr. Juma had been in the house that night, Rosetta would not have been raped. Perhaps he would have struggled and maybe paid for it with his own life. Who knows? But at least he would have been present to fight the battle with Rosetta. But that night, she fought it alone. She didn't win the battle, but they spared her life, even though it was devastated. So as you read through these stories, you may find a story that applies to you as a person, that applies to your neighbor, that applies to somebody else that you know. And as judges and magistrates, as we sit in the courts, we actually go through a lot of trauma. There's so much of it. I'm glad my sister Wasilwa doesn't have as much trauma as those of us who deal with criminals do. But I also know that when a claimant comes before her court and says they have taken away his livelihood, she also feels it. Because a man without money is not someone that can be comforted. A man without means to support his family. So I salute you, Justice Wasila, for the work that you do. And for the doctors, I know the other day, 2 months ago, I was in a doctor's clinic, and I read one of those magazines, and they were talking about the trauma that doctors go through as they examine each patient. You know, in the course of examination, you feel that that disease is now your disease without knowing it. And that is how judges and magistrates feel. Every time you take evidence from a witness, in the night, you don't know whether that will be repeated to you in your house or not. I remember as a young magistrate, I did one case where some people had broken into a factory in the industrial area, and they entered through the roof. So when I went home that night, we were living in a maisonette in one of the estates here. That night, I felt those men were going to come into our house. I didn't sleep because it looked so real and so close. So those are the experiences that we carry with us wherever we go. And so after doing a few of these cases, most of them, let me say, I decided, how can the outside world come to know about these stories? Because the stories took place in homes. Some of them took place in the play field where little boys were playing their game of football, and somebody just romped there and took off with one of the boys and sodomized him. Some of the stories were just on the footpath where our children walk daily. Those of us in the city don't know, but those of us who have grown up in the city know what it means to walk from home to school, maybe covering 3 kilometers, and you're all by yourself most of the time. Those stories, those incidents take place there. So I asked myself, how can people get to know about these things? And especially when we have invited people to come and live with us. Your cousins, your nephews can come and live with you in the house. And every day you leave your house to go to work, you may think all is well. And these things can happen within to you or to your child right under your nose, and you would never know. I remember in one of the estates where we were living, we had a neighbor. And this neighbor had a brother, and they had a house help in the house. So the brother used to live downstairs in one of the rooms on the ground. It was a maisonette. The house help, of course, slept upstairs with the children. But many nights, there were arrangements for the house help to leave the bedroom and come down to join the brother of the owner of the home for their thing. And they did that for many years. Nobody came to know until much, much later. So these things happen. When you read this story, this book, you'll find in one of the stories, a grandson had come visiting the grandmother, the sister to the grandmother. And because they couldn't find room for him in the outer house, he slept in the same house where the grandmother was, who was sharing now the inner room with the granddaughters. And in the middle of the night, one of the girls felt they wanted to answer a call of nature. She went out, and she didn't get back to the bedroom where the grandmother was before she was defiled. So these things happen every single day. And I said, because the cases go on in court, and sometimes when we read the judgments, we read those judgments very fast because there's much work. And even if you read them slowly, most of the people wouldn't follow what you are saying, and they wouldn't appreciate what you have actually done. And that was one of the reasons why I said, well, let these stories go out. Let them go out to the teachers, to the mothers, to the young girls, to the young boys, so that they read these stories by themselves and be appreciative of the different scenarios in which these sexual abuse cases take place. You don't need to come to a hotel like this to commit that offense. It can be committed anywhere and everywhere and at any time. Even in the church, our pastor is here. He will be among the panelists. We hope to hear from him whether he has heard stories of this nature. They take place. Even the pastors themselves are the predators. The congregants are the predators. The other time, I think there was one case reported in the paper of where a pastor had taken the wife of one of his flock and run off with her. Well, that may not be rape, it may not be what, but what kind of, what are we telling the society in which we live? If you, as a pastor, can do such a thing, what about the ordinary man, the ordinary woman? So this story says something to us. It is not the work of a genius. It is simply just putting out experiences that we have had, I have had in the courts, to be shared by the Wanjikus and the Nafulas of this world, so that they can become more aware of the environment in which they live. Because if you are not given knowledge, you will not know. In my mother tongue we say, you can only do that which you know. Okay? You can't say, I have a cow in that herd, or you can't say, those are my cows, unless your one little cow is there. So, for you, if you get this knowledge, please pass it on. Pass it on to the others so that they may know, so that they may appreciate. And one other point that came to my mind as I wrote these stories is that with the coming into force of the Sexual Offences Act, which was enacted in 2006, the sexual offences, the occurrence of sexual offences has in fact become greater than it was. Maybe because of the media. Those days nobody reported. But today, every single case, almost every single case is reported. But hundreds and thousands of others go unreported because of the culture that Dr. Kihara was talking about. Because of the stigma that Dr. Kihara talked about. If you are known to have been raped, who are you to speak? You may be the one who invited the culprit to come and rape you. Those are the things that people talk about. So when a woman hears that, or worse still, a man, a boy, if he is sodomized, he would take years even to come to terms with the fact of having been sodomized, let alone opening his mouth to say anything about it. So for us who are here this morning, I am glad that we all know these things, that we appreciate them, and that we are the ambassadors of the good that still remains in society. If Dr. Kihara speaks like this at many of the gatherings in Kajiado, someone will come to hear about it, about these things. And maybe even if it is only 1 out of 100, she will have made a point to that one. And maybe from that one, we can get a multiplication of maybe 1 more, 2 more, or 3 more. And if it is a family, of course, the effect will be much greater. And so, this is being shared by the doctors, or with the doctors, with the engineers and the social workers in the house, with the pastors, because it is true that none of us can make it work without the input of the other. I know there's somebody from the police this morning, I hope, who will give us some idea about what they do and how they work with the rest of us. Because without the police doing their bit, without the doctors doing their bit, without, who else? Yes, the police, the doctors, and then the prosecutors who come to court, the judges will have no work to do. Or if they do, it will simply be acquitting, setting free, because the police have not gathered the evidence. The forensics person has not carried out sufficient examination of the specimens that were sent. Maybe the doctor didn't examine. Like this last week, I had a case in court. A doctor came to court, a young doctor, and in that case, it was alleged that the deceased had an incision in the side of his lower abdomen, and a part of the intestine had been pulled out of that part, and it was just lying on the ground. So I asked the doctor, can you really just try and make me understand? How did this happen? But I couldn't really appreciate how a segment in the middle of the intestines could have come out through that incision, leaving the upper part and the lower part of it. That is a riddle I still have to deal with because the case is ongoing. I don't know how the rest of the evidence will be, or whether the accused person will be pinned down to it or not. So these are the things that all of us have to do. So what is the way forward in these matters? I think Dr. Kihara offered some. And what I can say from my point of view, and also as a Christian, is that the law alone will not save us. Whether it is the law in the Bible or the law in the book, it will not save you, it will not save me, it will not stop these cases from happening. What needs to happen is that you and I must change from within and then help others to change from within. And it's only then that we can begin to have normal human beings living in our midst. Those who will not rape pregnant women. Those who will not sodomize 5-year-olds. Those who, it's the story, it goes on and on, and it can only bring tears to your eyes. So the law will not save us. If it did, the kind of sentences that we have been giving to sexual offenders, up to life imprisonment, but it has never deterred anyone. It hasn't. So what is the missing link? Yesterday, as I sat somewhere, I looked through the Parents magazine for October 2019, and these are some of the suggestions. I just had to write these ones down on the way forward, proposals by some people. One said that it is necessary to compile and publish a list of sex offenders so that their names are everywhere, and if that happens, it may prevent others from committing the offense. I would like to inform you that as the judiciary, we keep registers of sexual offenders. The only thing I don't know, maybe one of my colleagues will help me on this one, whether we have published, but you see, whatever documents we have in the courts are public documents. Anyone who wishes to go and search a register of sexual offenders will find that register. And then somebody else said, give very harsh sentences to these people so that this can serve as a deterrence. But as I've said, the offenses, the sentences under the sexual offenses are very harsh, except that in the recent past, the Supreme Court said, and they are right to some extent, that as a judge or as a magistrate, you should not have your hands tied behind your back when it comes to sentencing. You must be given an opportunity to consider the circumstances surrounding the case so that you are able to mete out an appropriate sentence. But up to the recent past, we are giving strict sentences. If it is 20 years, it is 20 years. If it's life imprisonment, that is for defilement of children under 11 years, somebody goes to prison for life until they are released on appeal. Somebody else said there should be timely and proper forensic investigations into these cases to ensure solid evidence to support the cases when they get to court. And as you have heard our Chief Justice speak many times, especially on corruption cases, he says, we will convict if the evidence is there. We will set free if the evidence is not there. So in the courts, it all depends on the evidence. If there is no evidence, people will walk scot-free in the streets. They will become serial offenders, serial sex abusers. Then another person said there should be quick investigation of the cases by police and a quick disposal of cases by courts. I would like to commend our magistrates in this regard because most of the cases, these cases of sexual offenses, start in the magistrates' courts. And many of them are disposed of within a year unless the circumstances are such that a case cannot be concluded within the year. The cases become more complex as they go higher to appeal to the court, to the High Court on appeal or to the Court of Appeal. That's where it takes a bit longer. And somebody else said, and I think this is a very important point, give civic education to the public to create awareness of the circumstances of SGBV cases and the measures to be taken in case one is affected. Civic education is what we are doing this morning. Civic education is what that book is all about. So if you read it, please lend it to your neighbor so that they can read it and get educated. Because I've been told, and I think it's true, we have all heard it, that knowledge is power. Knowledge is power. If you have knowledge, for those of us who are conscious about diet, if you read enough, you will eat properly. If you have knowledge, of course, it will make you take your child to school and make a difference between those two cases we saw on the screen by Dr. Kihara. The lady on this side saw emaciated her child. Both of them are dying. The other ones on that side looking full and vibrant. Because the difference there is in the knowledge that they have. And the Bible says, my people perish because of lack of knowledge. So we are acquiring knowledge this morning. We will acquire it each and every day of our lives. And we shall, if we pass it on, we shall have done something to help one would-be victim. Because your antennas will remain like that, and theirs will also remain like that, and they are acutely aware of the circumstances even as they walk around. And one young man in that magazine was of the view that sentences for sex offenders should be reasonable. And in his view, he said 10 years would, at most, would be good. And the reason he gave is that none of us is perfect. So we need to give a second chance even to an offender. That is what that young man was pleading for sex offenders. And he also said we should have consider compensation for the victims because of the trauma they go through, the physical tears that they suffer. That is something that the courts, in fact, when we are dealing with these cases, you are at liberty, you have the discretion to offer, to ask that the perpetrator pays some compensation to the victim. And he also said that the government should try and ensure that the sexual harassment policy in every department or in every office. Sexual harassment policy. We within the judiciary have discussed sexual harassment policy. We have approved it, but it is yet to be implemented. And I know that in many other places, we were sharing with Dr. Kihara a little earlier before the session began, that even as a professional, you are sexually harassed. As a woman professional, you are sexually harassed. In one of my former employments, I told her I had to leave the job because of sexual harassment. And I said I would rather leave the job than compromise. And I think it has paid huge dividends. That is why I'm here this morning. Otherwise, if I had stayed on, I don't think I would be the kind of person that I am today. This book would probably have never been written because I would probably have not gone back to the judiciary. And by way of conclusion, I started off as a magistrate many, many years back, more than 40 years ago. As a magistrate, I worked for 3 years. My late grandfather, who didn't want me to send people to hang, put pressure on me and said, no, you will not stay on. So I had to leave. But now, I came back and I'm sending people to hang, not because of my own wish, but because of the evidence that is placed before me when I hear these cases. And I know that God will have mercy on me when he judges me finally. So, ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you so much for coming. I want to thank the IAWJ for coming and for supporting me. I want to thank you, Dr. Kihara, and your medical team for coming. I want to thank you, Dr. Shako. We shall be seeing you there in a little while, for coming to represent the forensic experts in this field. I want to thank the church for coming. I want to thank my friends for coming. The media is here. Thank you so much. And my son here for agreeing to be the MC at this function. We couldn't have made a better choice. So thank you so much, everyone. The storytellers were Dr. Kihara, Mr. Sitati, Maimuna, and others who are seated here, and of course, Justice Wasilwa, who opened the floor for us. With those few remarks, may the Lord bless us even as we take the message out there. God bless you.